But it was a way of getting back, and going to Vegas and then the helicopter, then running up into the corner.
We should be in Hamilton around about 10 to 12, quarter to 12 to 10 to 12. But we may have a break, a short comfort stop at Ringaroori, depending on how we're going for time. Thank you. Okay, we'll be at the Rotorua Information Centre and Bus Terminal in a couple of minutes for those people getting off here.
I don't just stay here too long because I want to see everything.
Welcome aboard. I'm Tua, and I'm your guide through the Jurassic period of New Zealand's ecological evolution. The good news is, because New Zealand is the youngest country, we don't need to travel too far back in time, just millions of years. So, keep your hands in the boat and let's go. Here we are in the newly formed islands that my ancestors will call home. Aotearoa, New Zealand. The remoteness of these islands created a unique and isolated ecosystem, with most of the land covered by rainforests. It was beautiful, but far from peaceful. Us, Tuatara, have been here for millions of years, but we were never alone. These guys were here too. Just as well they went extinct before you all turned up.
Hi everyone, Jenny here. New Zealand's isolation meant animal and plant life took a different evolutionary path to the rest of the world. Here, birds were king. Birds filled every part of the food chain. We even had a bird version of the elephant, the 3.7 metre high moa. But don't be scared, he might have been huge, but he was a vegetarian. But the housed eagle wasn't. He sat at the top of the food chain with a wingspan of 3 meters and flight speeds of up to 80 kilometers an hour. He was the largest and strongest eagle the world has ever seen. When man first arrived from Polynesia around 1,000 years ago, they brought with them not just an advanced Stone Age culture that made it possible to hunt with weapons, but also dogs and rats. This was the start of the dark times for us birds, and many species were wiped out.
This side. This is actually one of 2 villages in the district. The village is called Whakarewarewa. There you can see the name of the village on the left-hand side over here. You can see the full name of the village down below it. Te Whakarewarewa o Te Oputau o Wāhia. That's 36 letters in total.
I was going to say that there.
And it means the gathering together of the war forces of Wāhia. Wāhia was a paramount chief of these clans here. Lived about 400 years ago. Before going into battle, they would come into this geothermal area and perform a type of war dance. So it's actually in reference to a war dance. So whakarewarewa means to rise up. And just on the side over here, you can see in the lower part a few cracks in the earth. That's from a 7 on the Richter scale that passed through here in 1988. Now, they call this area earthquake flat. As I mentioned, we have 350 to 400 quakes in Rotorua annually. In this one spot here, they get 800.
Wow.
So they have twice the amount of quakes. But as I mentioned, the quakes are so far down that, you know, you don't really notice they're happening, especially in Rotorua. So this is another caldera. We'll see another one as we go further south. So, Māori is my actual second language. I grew up around the language as such, folks, but it wasn't until I actually started to work at that geothermal area, the one we passed, that I started to speak our language, mainly through the encouragement of the elderly guys that were there at the time. So many of them were in their 50s and 60s, fluent speakers of the language, and as such it's because of them and their encouragement that I started taking up our language. So I could always understand Māori, but never actually took the time out to learn to speak. Able to see in the far distance, you'll see there's a lot of steam rising there too. There is actually a geothermal power plant further south here. You might even see the stack or the chimney to it. And using geothermal activity, we generate about 8% of New Zealand's electricity.
Wow.
So geothermal activity has been explored as a new reusable source as such, but 80% of our electricity, as I mentioned, generated by geothermal. The majority is hydrothermal dams, our rivers and lakes, and another one that they're currently investigating are the windmills, and that's the wind turbines further south, basically in Wellington. Just around the corner, we just might see that thermal power. No, we can't. Just a little bit too steamy this morning, folks. Of course, on the right hand side we have the Waitapu Tavern, but that's sacred waters of a different time. So remember, YWAI is water, and tapu is holy or sacred. Now, the first pool that we're going to see this morning is our largest accessible mud pool. We call it ngā mōkai, or the playthings. Now, in our local hospital, one of our local hospitals, the Queen Elizabeth, they actually have a mud pool of their own, where they go out, they gather the clays, they take it back to the hospital, allow it to dry out, and they remix that with water for the patients that go there. Now, those who bathe in the waters, well, the mud itself is very high mineral content, very good for the body, helps heal body ailments and sicknesses, and as such, it's very good for arthritis, rheumatism, and lumbago. As I mentioned, so many minerals in the mud that it's very effective. But they also say that the mud makes an excellent facial mud pack. But at the moment, this mud won't melt your, won't rejuvenate your skin, it'll just melt it all off. The mud here, as I mentioned, is about a good 70 to 75 degrees Celsius. And the mud pool's about 3 meters deep. In fact, the only difference between this mud pool and quicksand is you'll cook on the way down. Now, as I mentioned, kaolin clays, so they do use this type of clay in making it shine. Of course, a few too many impurities, I think, in the mud itself, but you'll find that 3 meters down in this pool, and this you'll find it's basically a good rock base ringing it down. The team has actually filtered through, picked up minerals along the way, mixed them, so sulphur as a result of that eats away the rock surface underneath, turning it into clay, and that mixes with the rainwater that's accumulated. This has taken about several hundred years to form this pool, and as long as the pressure escapes here in this one point, we're fairly safe. If it was ever to move, of course, the surrounding vegetation, well, that would be bad. And even with the vegetation here, plants have adapted specifically to living amongst geothermal activity, such as this plant here. This is New Zealand Manuka tea tree. We actually had both types of plants growing here. One is Manuka, and that's the soft, thinner leaf here. The one that's much finer, spiky, that's the Manuka. Otherwise, tea tree oil, they get tea tree oil out of this plant, and the Manuka honey, tea tree honey. Now, tea tree honey is very good for skin disorders such as psoriasis, but this is a plant that we obtain it from. When Captain Cook arrived here, we'd run out of tea supplies, and he tried this plant here, which made a very pleasant sort of tea, and hence the nickname tea tree. But as long as the pressure escapes here, these plants are very safe, and they all have a very shallow root system, which enables them to survive. See, that's one of the larger little bead steam things in there underneath. It's hydrogen sulfide, carbon dioxide and stuff. It gives the illusion of everything being boiling all close to where they keep it. My ancestors, especially for Auckland, the mythology there is that when our high priest left the canoes and started trailing further south, he climbed under the mountains further south and wasn't used to blizzards. Because if you're coming from islands, you're not used to snow and cold, and he got caught in a freak snowstorm down there. And they say that he was close to death, and he ended up praying to his sisters to send him more. And they sent him forward in the form of fire. He dove into the ocean, came up in it, everywhere they submerged from the water or the earth, they'd look around and then dive back underneath the earth. So this is part of the trail that they left behind.
Got it. Well, that's a good.
So yeah, that's their story.
Yeah, that's all right.
But the fault line, that's where their way of describing why the fault line just runs in one straight line. And we're going to go to the top up there, folks. And basically don't. About 75.
Yeah, so that's
just normal.
Yeah.
But those who do live in some of the geothermal areas do live to a fairly good age. From the village, the oldest one was just a couple of years ago. She was about 95, I think, when she passed away. Some people live older. this is a New Zealand silver fern. Of course, it's the underside of the leaf that's silver. And basically, when they'd be moving out in forest and bush, for our people, this was one of the markings. You can see this is just your ordinary plain fern underneath, but that's New Zealand silver fern. So very good if you're marking at night, leaving trails behind, but most times you didn't want somebody following you. But if you did want my family to follow, this is the place. Now we're going to start in reverse today because I always like starting with the best first. And that's what we've always
Devil's Bath.
There's only one water supply, and it's just on that, beyond that little embankment over there. The water itself, you can see from that supplies this pool, you can see there is sulphur in it, but it's not as yellow as what you see here. Most of the sulphur that's actually in this pool is actually from the surrounding embankments. So as steam passes through different soil levels, picks up minerals along the way, sulphur will be one of those, and deposits around the side of the pool. The pool is contributed to by that little stream as such flowing in here in rainwater. So it's a very acidic pool. I think about a 2.5. And the interesting thing about this pool is as the water filters down through the different soil levels here, it comes up on the other side where you can see steaming on the other side that you can actually use for cooking. Alkaline waters. As such, there's only 2 pools in this valley that you can actually use for cooking, and that's one of them over there. But it's the brightest and amazing of the coloured pools that you actually see here this morning. It is. It's the most beautiful of all the pools I think that's in Australia. Of course, the hot springs themselves aren't that accessible. So this is the other alkaline spring just down below here that came to that water there. All supplied from the Devil's Bath. They're the only 2 pools that you can actually use in this cooking. We will see one a little bit later on, but of course we have a water cooking before. Introduce birds that nest in there. We have swallows, sparrows, blackbirds, myna.
Nice.
And they actually nest here mainly because, of course, the steam keeps it nice and warm for incubation of the eggs. Having a lot of steam and thermal activity around here also means that there's a lot of larvae and insects. And the other thing is for defence. It's a good defence against cats and that, so hence the reason they like to nest in these areas. So in the middle of winter, it's not unusual to see them actually flying at certain times just to go and forage for bugs and grubs for their young. Just over here you have a very good concentration of sulphur. Oh, this is private. It's privately run at the moment. Okay. So the folk who actually run the place, they actually do it.
When it's about 7,
Now this actually
okay.
does have algae.
you know when you'll have like hair shampoo.
Hair shampoo kills the algae off and leaves a long cycle. There's little brown coral-like formation.
Yes, it's neutral. It's 7.
But you can see that a lot of the trees, the branches, etc., that have fallen,
the chemist.
become solidified,
Beauty shop to buy
coated by the
hair shampoo. You would
bitumen
look
and
for
such.
something around about 7.
And
So if it's too low, your hair will end up like this.
so you can see big coatings on them. And
Too harsh.
Forgot to mention too as we pass that sign over there, that's a good cross section of the actual pool itself. Champagne pool, not only because of the bubbling, but because it is like it's in a champagne flute. But as I mentioned, several hundred years ago this was formed, and you can see the amount of debris that it threw out. That's all those rocks and the boulders in the upper layer. Of course, you can see other areas of volcanic eruptions that occurred in the district, and such, and the ash that they left behind.
So this one here, this Mount
What I've been weaving the most koi tani. Tani was a walking weave technique. It looks a little bit like beading. It's got those sort of geometric designs, but of course it's just double spine. We don't use needle. In a steam vent, it would be instant 3rd degree burn. That's how dangerous, and that's why they say 100 degrees, because you could end up with something like that. But you know, thermal activity does move and change. There was a little guy just over here in this little leaf. Beyond that, a bit of blue. The blue sometimes is because the water is more alkaline and it's silica reflecting the UV in the atmosphere, so that's why we put it on a blue. These sparrows are of course going over to the terrace as well. You can see little footsteps down there from the pied stilts. A lot of the local bird life actually will come down here to forage for bugs and larvae and grubs as such, early hours of the morning. Temperature down below us is about 70 degrees Celsius, about up to 170 Fahrenheit. Not the type of place you want to slip into. But of course they call it artist colour because of the myriad of colours from this point. They sent him warmth in the form of fire guardians. They dove underneath the ocean, came up at White Island first, further closer to the land, and just kept on coming up, searching the land until they eventually arrived at this mountain here, bringing him warmth. So that's how we explain activity moving in a straight line. But beyond that, we're actually in a caldera at the moment. We've been through a few of them this morning. Of course, Rotorua is a large caldera itself, and we'll be going across to this one in our very next trip. But this mountain down here, besides White Island, that's fairly active as a erupting island as such, but it doesn't have a lot of fiery lava, etc. It's just a bit of ash that's blown into the air. This has been our most active geyser, Ruapehu, Its last eruption was back in 2007. It threw a bit of ash in the air, but nothing of any great consequence. The last major eruption from it was in 1995, and it blew enough ash that came in our direction that was about 3 or 4 inches on the roof. So I should know because I had to sweep it off. But and that was the last major one. But our eruptions here, these volcanoes, are more likely to have an ignimbrite eruption, which is the softer form of rock, so it's not fiery like you would find overseas in Hawaii, etc. Just looking at New Zealand itself, and on that side there you can see the Pacific Plate. Pacific Plate is actually moving down, our Indian Australian Plate is moving up, and as long as we have these vents, we're fairly safe. But of course in Māori we call the North Island Tika Maui, which means the fish of Maui. Maui is one of the most famous of all Polynesian ancestors or discoverers, and they say that he's attributed to having fished many islands out of the waters. But the reason it's the fish of Maui is because we say this is a whale. The head is a section here, the fins, and of course the tail. It's quite, I think it's quite amazing that they could actually see that in mine sight, considering they couldn't see the overlay of the land. And so when we talk about going up the island, we're talking about going south, because we're going to the head. So you're going up the fish, down the fish is going actually north. So we say everything in reverse as such. But the South Island of New Zealand is the canoe of Maui, and Stewart Island down the bottom is its anchor. But so that's what we call New Zealand, Te Kā Maui. See how high the levels in them do get, but we haven't had enough heavy rain to collect in them as such. Of course you can still see that oily slick on top of the pool. Remember, that's the crude oil.
That's the crude oil.
That's the crude oil, yes. So it's all the thermal activity compressing the plant life here, and hey presto, crude oil. Just where our gentleman is over there, we have that's the newest of the craters as such. That one over there opened in 1968. In fact, there used to be a walkway across there. And they woke one day to find that they had a new crater on the side. So there are actually craters underneath the entire surface here. But luckily, for most things, when activity is actually opened up or exploded, they usually occur during the evening, early hours of the morning. Could be they open up during craters.
Did you hear that? When those things happen,
Usually in the morning.
early in the morning,
So that's a good thing.
Don't want to hurt any of it first.
That's definitely not why it's getting
Well, got to be practical.
I'm going to ask a real dumb question.
That's
How
not a very
much-
good question.
If you woke up one morning and found it, how far down was it? I mean, I understand that it was a huge one, but how far down was it before it started?
Definitely see the oil on top of the pool. Very, very clear there. But as I mentioned, this is the baby of all the craters in the valley. We actually have a very good viewing platform just on the side over there. You can look straight into the port floor. They need a no vacancy sign there. All vacancies filled.
If they went down further, would there be more? They could really ruin this place in a hurry. How are they going to put out? be interesting to see what these colors come out as. Keep wiping my lens. Is that a good idea?
Because of the hydrogen sulfide, they didn't realise the concentration.
Yeah, so now you stay up, further up it. We just have to put
And this water sits about 50 to 60 degrees Celsius. It's about 150 Fahrenheit.
6120 plus 30.
Quick bit of geology about the geyser. She's about 150 years old. The reservoir below her holds about 30,000 litres of water. She can play for up to an hour and can hit heights of between 10 and 20 metres. But how high she goes and how long she stays there for is totally dependent on the amount of water in that reservoir below her. So we suggest you take your photos as she builds up into this first full eruption, because there's no guarantee she's going to hit that height again in her cycle. Just quickly, the geyser is named after Lady Constance Knox. Now, quite honestly, in New Zealand history, she wasn't too important, but her father was, and he was a gentleman called Lord Ranfurly and was the 15th Governor-General of New Zealand. And in May of 1903, he was out here with his family to see how that prison camp was getting on. To mark the occasion of that visit, his daughter christened the geyser. Her name was Lady Knox, and that's how the association came about. The word geyser actually comes to us from Iceland, and in English it simply means to gush forth. Now down here we do not call these geysers, okay? A geyser to us is a two-legged elderly gentleman, not one of these. You've got a few minutes to go yet, so please take plenty of photos and enjoy your time with us. Thank you.
Let me see. I can't see it.
Sam.
Now, the interesting thing about the flax leaf is when this plant dries, you can see over here it starts to roll and curl into itself to form a tube. So for those who actually do take in the dancing, a lot of people mistake the skirt to actually have been made out of bamboo as such, but it's actually just made out of this leaf. So I've actually already prepared the strands this morning. So what we'll do is we'll take these outer edges off the leaf. If we're working it directly from the plant itself, all we'd have to do is just use the round edge of a mussel shell, make an incision into the dull side of the flax leaf, just using the shell itself. And I'll just show you the middle section of this. If I take the middle section and use the edge of the flax leaf, or the edge of the shell I should say, I'm able to extract a certain amount of fibre straight from the leaf itself. So there's fibre that exists on the inside of the flax leaf. So 52 varieties of this leaf, but there are only 4 as such that contain fibre. So I've already placed incisions onto so there's a shiny side of the leaf, a dull side. I've already placed incisions into the leaf itself. And we just use the straight edge of the shell to take off the flesh. Okay, so just get rid of this.
Amazing.
So 52 native varieties, but there are only 4 that yield this type of high fibre content on the inside. Now when we make the dancing skirt, if we actually just leave some incisions along the entire leaf to create a design. So what I've gone and done is just mark lines here, and I've just scraped between the lines. Traditionally they'd actually just take only the fibre. They very rarely leave the flesh on the leaf, unless it was just for tags for the outside of rain capes. You can see how effective the mussel shell is as well. It's we use it as a knife to cut off those excess pieces.
May I feel it?
Yeah, by all means.
It's strong.
Yeah, it's very strong.
Very strong.
Now, if you're making a dancing skirt for an adult, you actually have to prepare 240 of these strands. 240 strands, however, would make about a size 70 centimetre waist, say 28-inch waistline. So of course the more generously proportioned you are, the more strands that would be required. But as I mentioned, when this leaf dries out, it will roll and curl. It only takes about 2 to 3 days. In fact, you can find within 1 day this can curl if it's a warm enough day. But to change in colour from this green colour to a creamy colour that we use for the dancing skirt takes roughly about 2 to 3 weeks. So in the dancing skirt, the longest process is actually just in the preparation. Now what I'm going to show you next is our traditional method of spinning fibre. And so what we do is separate the strands into 2 equal groups and spin fibre between the palm of the hand, and we also use the bare leg. So we roll each strand down, let them join, roll them back together as one to form a 2-ply cord. So this is how we prepare our fibres for fishing ropes and fishing nets. Ladies prepare fibres for clothing as well. Traditionally both men and women would weave, although dominantly the ladies did most of the weaving. The idea was that if you were travelling you had to know how to look after yourself and prepare fibre, repair garments. So I'll just spin that other one.
Yeah, here you go.
You can test the strength of the cord itself if you wish to. But no, it does not remove all the hair from the legs.
Oh, it doesn't do that too?
No, otherwise it wouldn't do it. It might wear them down slightly, but it doesn't really remove them. So as I mentioned, these strands will kill within, say, 24 hours or so. They'll change in colour from green to cream in about 2 weeks. And then we weave this fibre on the end to form a waistband, and then we'll place it into vegetable dyes, so the white fibres will actually eventually take on a black coloration, and the green sections will turn cream, so you'll get a black and white skirt. But you know, the dancing skirt is only for that, just for dancing. Traditionally what they would do is just maybe take most of the flesh off, leave a small portion like that, let that roll and curl, and then they'd weave that fibre on the outside of a fibre base, and lay a cape with tags on it. As such, the rain cape had a rustling or clicking sound, and as you were walking or dancing, they could hear the rustling clicking sound, and they took it from the rain cape and developed the dancing skirt. Dancing skirt takes about 3 to 4 weeks to make. A rain cape, maybe about 6 months. Good clothing from your shoulder to about your knee. The capes would take you up to a year. Some of the fine capes, especially where we've actually woven this into fine cotton threads, could take you up to 5 to 10 years to make. But you know, having taken that long to create, they'd last you a lifetime. But there you go, you might want to take it with you as a bookmarker. If not, donate them back to Mother Nature.
Oh, thanks.
You find that's so usually what I do, is we put them back in the bush, because once they dry out or they deteriorate, they simply feed the bush again.
Yep.
That's fine.
Of course, we have lots and lots of tree ferns, as you see everywhere. Directly ahead of us, of course, you can go off into the bush, cut the tree fern down, turn it into a fence line or wall embankment. The good thing about tree fern is that it'll grow back by itself. In fact, if you watered the fence line every day, every single tree fern would grow back. Great if you don't really like your neighbours, of course. You could start off with a 2-metre fence, 6 foot, and you'll never see them again. But not only that, it's really quite rustic because it brings in nature into your backyard. It makes a very nice fence lining. So lots of our rural area, urban areas I should say, homes like having the fern itself represents the first growth. So when we're talking about a family unit, we'll usually use this because, as you can see, they come out in units. But you can just see a little head on this plant just in this section over here. Just starting to grow out that one. So it symbolises the family. You can see the dried tree fern just over here. The mamaku can actually grow to about 20 metres in height, about 60 feet. This is one of the only ones that we actually can use for cooking, because what they do is they take the trunk, you place it into the earth oven, cook it, and the inners actually end up like stewed apples.
What? Like what?
Stewed apples. But you can only do it with that one. These other ones not so not so good. Today it's just a cold water lake. From this one point where we are now to the lake itself is about 50 metres, so down by about 150 feet down there. It is a cold water lake. There's no rivers or river water flowing into it. As such, it's just purely rainwater, and the lake itself is 2 metres deep. You can see the algae and azolia sphagnum moss on top of the pools, and the colour of the pool just depends on whichever of the plants is the most dominant at the time. So it's not unusual to see azolia, the pinky floating moss, fern I should say, and it can actually take over the entire pool, so you'd actually be looking at a crimsony pink pool. Other times of course the green is more dominant. At the moment we have a bit of dappling here and there. And of course the wind direction will just move the fern and the algae just to one side or the other. But it's not unusual to see ducks down there feeding. Another plant that we have growing here that you wouldn't want to churn is that one with the bright leaves. This one here. This is one we call tutu. Native to New Zealand. In this, you can see it's got dark green leaves over there. It can grow to a few metres in height, good to 3-4 metres. But the toxicity of this is strong enough to turn an elephant toes up. It's like strychnine.
Oh, good. Well, we'll miss this.
Strangely, my ancestors at a certain time of year would prepare it and drink it as a form of health tonic. I don't know. So, how it's done and why they would do that, I don't know. But I actually use, this is one of the dyes that I use. So that's why I know this plant quite well. Of course, you have the common garden grass, the hoppers. They actually like to eat this plant. And just a couple of years back, 2002 actually, or 2004, in one region, of course, they have the honey hives through lots of manuka, native bush. But of course, the bees also like the excretion from those grass, those hoppers from the garden. They eat the leaves, excrete on the leaves. Bees liked it because it was sweet. They ate it, took it back to their honey and poisoned the honey. It didn't poison the bees, it just poisoned the people who ate it. And they didn't die or anything, they just had very upset stomachs. But it was from this plant here. Also, then we make the bracken, common bracken is growing over here. Traditionally, we dig this plant up, take the root out of it, pound it to get the starch out of it and turn that into a form of bread. Otherwise, if you get enough of these, bind them together, as you can see there's some dried ones there, but we'd take them to our waterways, put them into rivers and into the lakes. And the great thing about them is that the freshwater crayfish used to like hiding in them. And of course they'd worm their way into there. And then all you do is pick it up out of the lake, shake it out, get your fill of freshwater crayfish and then put it back again. So that's from this bracken. Otherwise used for bedding as well in traditional times, placed on the floors and then had woven mats placed on top of those.
That's the toilet paper.
Yeah, that's the toilet paper. So you know that. So yes, they used this for both writing paper and toilet paper into when the first pioneers came because of the underside leaf. Traditionally it's a medicine as well. If you got cut and then the cut got infected, you'd use the shiny side, well actually the dull side to help draw out the toxins, shiny side to help heal. So it has a good dual function on that one. But beyond that, most of our native plants are very good health-wise, as for blood purifiers. Well, come this way. Call out loud enough, you'll hear the echo going around the lake. You can see the lake after the actual eruption itself. It's a lot lower than what we see down below us, thanks to by at least a good 2 meters difference. There is actually a geyser that erupts down in that valley, or used to erupt for a period of 4 years from 1900 to 1904, and once it stopped erupting, the water actually rechanneled underneath and came up underneath this lake. There's about 200,000 cubic meters of water in that lake, and the lake itself is not that deep at all. It's only about a good 14 meters deep or so. But we'll go right down into the valley. It's part of the first regrowth after eruptions and such. It's this type of plant that usually starts out first. Not a very tasty berry. More the larger birds would probably eat it. It's more good for ruffles than anything else, but not good for all. So no, we've been, well, you know, in reality New Zealand is actually the watch-off of Australia. You know, when the continents were together, all those alluvial soils, well that's us.
They just went the other direction, right? Yeah, right.
So we split off from them. And so our animal life actually developed independently here. So a huge amount of bird life, but no mammals as such. But this is our closest point to this lake, Frying Pan Lake they call it. Here in Eco Crater.
It's bubbling right here.
That's right, that's the hydrogen sulfide and carbon dioxide gas has been given off. The only thing that survives in here is algae. It is also like the other pool that we've seen. You wouldn't want to drink the waters because of the arsenic, as well as other things that are in here. But there are points where you can see that where the actual springs in the water are. But the temperature of the lake sits on average about 50 degrees Celsius, say about 140 Fahrenheit. Yes, but it does have a natural overflow just on the other side, and that's where we're going to go because we'll be able to touch the water themselves. You can see when the vegetation here starts to decompose, you can see the iron oxide on top of the water, that sort of oily slick. Now that's the dye we actually use in the dancing skirt. So when the black coloration is actually obtained from black muds, I think I can see some just down below there. So what it is the muds have become iron rich because it's all decomposing now. The lake in the mist, you can see where some of the major parts of the springs in the lake are. Of course, we have these steaming cliffs in front of us. At one time they were called the Rock of Gibraltar, but about 1917 there was a huge hydrothermal explosion in the far end of the lake over there. In fact, the explosion was so great it was enough to go right up the valley to the top where you can see the establishment that we come from. You can see the building there, and actually destroy the accommodation house up there and kill 2 people. But that was the last eruption they had in the valley here, and that was in 1917. Of course, it destroyed the rock then and changed the name of the rock from the Rock of Gibraltar to Cathedral Rock. So if there's another explosion here, there'll be another name.
Another name, yeah.
But the natural flow comes from that lake, runs around the galaxy. We're going down into this part of the crater.
No.
That's where the Waimangu geyser was. The largest geyser in the world during, well, ever I think, used to erupt to 1,600 feet in height, a good 400 meters, well, 500 meters or so. You can see people running towards the geyser. You can see the amount of mud and rock that it would throw out, but it was coming out of this crater over here. It used to erupt on about a 36-day cycle or so. But of course, once this geyser basically blew itself out, of course the channels underneath changed and it started supplying this lake. So the lake level rose after that eruption, after the geyser stopped erupting. But we'll be moving right up into the basin itself and having a look over here. There is actually another hot spring there, and that's in Inferno Crater. But on a cold day, very nice. Feels very soft on the hand, even though it's from acidic waters. It's about a 2.5 or a 3, I think, there's such a pH level. Just along the sides over here, it's called the outside. It's abundant with lots of hot springs all around. Of course, this water here is not just. Yeah, the arsenic is a little bit of a problem. A little bit of arsenic poisoning is not too bad.
Arsenic and meningitis. I mean,
Yeah.
those are a couple of things you do have to look out for.
The measuring size so they do, they come down here constantly to monitor.
This is really good stuff.
That's the algae. That's the thermally adapted algae.
The minerals in the water, high silicate created a little bit of kerosene around the side here. The water is created a kerosene. Of course, the oranges, that's that greens, of course, the ferns are changing, they're getting a lot more lush as you move further down, simply because of all the steam here, because of the tropical area. But there are plants that are just peculiar to these certain areas that don't grow anywhere else in the world, 100%. A 4 to 5 week cycle this pool. So you'll find it actually does overflow. You can see how high the water level does get. This is its lowest point right now. When it gets to this point, it's about roughly, it can sink down to about a good 40 degrees Celsius. Otherwise, at its hottest, it's usually about, say, 70 degrees. And as beautiful as the water looks, and it, you know, when it's really full, you have that beautiful blue appearance. But as beautiful as the water looks, it's actually sulfuric acid.
Ah.
It has a pH level of 2.1. That's pretty high. So you'll get more than an acid peel if you actually sit in that pool. But it can drop from, of course, from the level that you see on the side of the walls there. It can drop for at least a good 8 meters. Now, when the pool does drop occasionally, you can hear it hissing away there on the side, and that's one of the smaller geysers there. Sometimes they'll erupt to a good 3 meters in height, a good 9 feet. And then, of course, once the water starts rising up again, it just submerges everything. But that's hydrogen, as I mentioned, that's sulfuric acid. Yeah. So this is a miniature world-class geyser. Of course, bird nest geyser is this one here, bird nest terrace geyser. At one time, this actually used to be the walkway right in front of you. In fact, you can see the walkway's been solidified now and has all the silica formations over the top of it. So that's the slow part here. They used to walk across this section.
Wow.
So it doesn't really take thermal waters long to take over a terrace, as you can see. You can see a build-up of stalactites along the side. But it erupts to that height 365 days a year. But with the carvings, you'll notice that we have 3 fingers on the hands. That's symbolic of the life cycle, birth, life and death. But connected to the first finger pointing straight backwards, that's actually a thumb there, and that represents life after death. Now, when we do show the facial area, you can distinguish between male and female because the men have the entire facial region tattooed. Women, it's the lip and chin area only. Sometimes the centre of the forehead, side of the nose. It was a symbol of aristocracy, form of skin carving. They would cut or inside those lines into your face, and as they cut the lines in, they'd tap in a pigment consisting of soot mixed with shark's oil or animal fat. So painful infection was known to occur. People did occasionally die. The art form would take place over many years, so it wasn't just done overnight. And basically the idea was that if you could endure this amount of pain, you could endure anything. Of course today our modern day tattooing is done mainly with needles, although there are some of those who actually like the indentations. The pain threshold is the same, so I'm told by the tattooist who did mine, but the healing of the scars is different. And plus you'll never get lines as sharp with traditional tools as you can with the modern needle. That's the difference, really, is the sharpness of the lines. But you'll find that they usually represent a hero or heroine renowned for featuring their lifetime. These pieces were carved back during the 1910s, and it's out of our native red pine tortut. Tortut is a soft wood to carve, it's durable, termite resistant, has its own natural preservative in the wood. But we'll come across those trees as we travel back into the centre itself. So that's a little bit about carving. So remember, not gods, a lot of mainly people. Occasionally they could represent guardians, guardian forests, waters, seas, but more often than not, ancestors who are renowned for feats during their lifetime. All the local clans of the district would gather there for sports and competition as such, and that's where they met. Now he was quite famed for his flute playing, so he was a musician of his time. You see, because in the evenings when you're on that island, a breeze starts from the island and actually fans out to the outer shores. So there are a lot of villages around this lake, and of course he had broken hearts in all of the villages because he was such a good musical flute player. You can see the full face in the front, so you can see obviously a male tattoo, and you'll find that that figurehead is meant to be symbolic of the guardian of the waters. The idea is that the head will actually drink the waters, so in other words, just like drinking from a cup, it's parting the waters. The upper figure there is more wiry, and of course the protruded tongue, etc. That is symbolic of the guardian of the forest, because like forest it's all entangled, hopefully to give the canoe strength. And at the end, the stern post there is symbolic of the guardian of the winds to give it speed. So war canoe is only used for close coastline travel and lake travel, not for the open ocean. We didn't sail across on single hull canoes, we would have been swamped. To make a canoe like this one, this is the tortata tree just going to the side here. These are some baby ones, you can just see its spiky leaves over there. So that's the tree we use for this type of canoe. It has to grow to at least a good 600 years just to make a canoe of this size. So that's our native red pine. Don't worry about those little bugs, those are what we call fish flies, they're not mosquitoes, so you're not going to be suddenly ravaged by them. But you can see in the eyes of the power shell how effective the power shell is. Protrusion of the tongue in the carvings is a symbol of aggression. In traditional times, just before we go into battle, we'd perform war dances. The idea was to make yourself look as aggressive and intimidating as possible, in the hope that you'd deter the opposition and frighten them off and avoid battle. But if it didn't work, well, it psyched you into battle at the same time. So basically, the protrusion of the tongue in all our carvings means you look good enough to eat. And they did, in traditional times, cannibalism did occur. It wasn't so much about a food source or inheriting the supposed mantle of the person you just vanquished. It was all about desecrating everything about them, from your pride to your anything dignified about you. In other words, if you thought you were that great and you have such aristocracy, you're going through here and you're coming out there.
Yeah.
So when they meant the bottom of the food chain, it really was literally what they meant. So the idea was about desecration. But even in this carve, the board, front board there, you can see the breaker, you can see the idea of the ferns, etc., just on those scrolls and those designs there. So you can see how nature does feature quite dominantly in our carvings, and they take bush life, bird life, fish life, and take symbols of those and incorporate them into their carvings. Even with the tattoo itself, we say that from the eyebrows up, those sort of lines are taken from birds of the air, because of course they go down, and of course from the nose down are birds of the earth. Wow. So that's a basic description of what the designs more or less mean. Yep. So birds of the earth are the lower ones, birds of the sky, the upper ones.
Right, should anybody require a taxi, there will be taxis available on Hobson Street, just outside the terminal. Parked parallel. Taxi stand. If you require any information, pop into the travel centre booking office. I'll have all the answers in there for you, I hope. There are probably one or two of you staying in hotels or hotels around the central city. Most of them are pretty close to the Sky City terminal. Right, so thank you all for your company today, travelling within the city. Just again a reminder please about your hand luggage, personal items inside the coach. Make sure you've got all those tidied up and taken video, including cell phones, wallets and iPods. Anything that is left on the coach will go to the Lost Property Office, which is at Sky City itself, and if not claimed within 3 months, it will go to charity.